it looks like we're at a working soda fountain in downtown USA, but as it really turns out, we're in a museum, and we're here with Gil Mangels, the founder of the Miracle of America Museum in Polson, Montana. Gil, how did the museum start?
Well, it's a long story, Rich, but started when I was about 3.5 years old, and I was with a family picnic down at Flathead Lake Beach, which is nearby, and I found a really neat-looking rock that attracted me. I picked it up, showed it to my mother. She said, "Oh, that's an Indian arrowhead. Need to save that." So that art form and something historic. I didn't know it was historic at the time, but it intrigued me. I was drawn to that. And then my grandparents on my dad's side lived nearby, and I was always over there playing on their farm machinery and in their Model A Ford sedan, and I'd drag home old wrenches, horseshoes, much to my dad's chagrin, but I was always interested, seemed to be in the antique end of it, and so, or antique items, and as I continued on, I would become interested in more things. I'd look at books and think, wow, that's really neat. My grandmothers, both of them, live fairly close by, and one of them gave me a pistol. It was a working pistol, but I didn't go shoot anybody. I even took it to school. That became part of my collection. I had a little box. I kept the pistol in. And the other grandmother gave me a rifle. It was one like Teddy Roosevelt carried. And I about wore the thing out, just pretending and levering it and dry firing it. So I didn't shoot anybody. I even took them to school to show my classmates. Well, then I became interested in old cars. I mean, the Model A sedan that my grandparents had, I wanted that. And about that time, growing up in the 50s, hot rodding had come into being. And the hot rod magazines were about 25 cents, 35 cents. When I could afford it, I'd buy them, and I'd dream about converting that Model A sedan into a hot rod. Well, my dad thought I had too much interest in it, and he sold it for $35. Of course, back in the day, but that really hurt me. But as I got into high school, a man in town gave me a '33 Ford two-door sedan. Wow, that was classy, and I drug it home. Friend helped pull it, and we didn't have it running then, but I had it running a few hours after we got it home. My dad was not very happy about it, that I'd got a car on my own. He wanted me to stay home working on the farm, I think was the thing. I mean, I'd been driving tractor and truck for so long, but anyhow, then I fixed up the car. I drove to school a few times. It was in my senior year, so I didn't have a lot of time. And I always wanted to be a highway patrolman, so I joined the Army to become a military policeman. And I took training at Fort Ord in California, and then down in Georgia, took military police training. Then I was assigned as a military policeman to West Point Military Academy, not as a cadet, but as a military policeman. I loved the Point. So much history there, the big cannons. One of my favorite duties. I mean, I enjoyed the gate and the parking duties. I didn't like security so much, but the museum duty. There was always somebody there at the museum for security. And I loved that duty because I could look at the old guns and the other bayonets and so forth. And that really kept my interest up in history of America. But I always wanted to go to Germany to meet relatives of my grandparents, and I asked for duty to Germany.
This is around what time?
This was in 1961.
Okay, right at the height of the Cold War.
Yeah, the Cold War was starting seriously. I mean, there was civil defense and all kinds of stuff, but I got assigned the rest of my tour, almost 2 years, to Frankfurt, Germany, and did a lot of sightseeing there. I didn't for some reason I didn't buy many antiques on a serviceman's pay. That would have been hard, but I did a lot of traveling. And one time we took a trip, a 3-day leave. A couple friends and I went up to Berlin, I remember Berlin was a divided city at that time, and the wall was up. The communists had put the wall up to keep their people from escaping into a free country. And that, I questioned that, but I didn't think too much about it until I went to Berlin on a visit. And I remember the two sectors, the free sector controlled by the Allies and mainly the Americans, and the eastern sector controlled by the communists. Well, in the eastern sector, all there was Soviet guards, which we couldn't take pictures of. In the western sector, there was laughing, there was families, there was picnics you could see out in the parks, there was rebuilding. It was freedom, you know, freedom like kind of like we enjoyed to America, although they were surrounded, but they were still happier people because they felt like they were free. And so going through East Berlin, it was very depressing. That depression that came with slavery, and no industry, no laughing, no smiling. And that deeply affected me. I didn't give it a lot of thought at that time, but it did deeply affect me. And I got back home, and the anti-Vietnam protests, people tearing down America, saying how evil America was. And I said, America's better than that. We've made a few mistakes in our history, but you know, America has fed the world. We've helped every nation on earth. You know, sure, we made a few mistakes, and so I began studying a little bit, studying the Constitution of the United States of America, and I thought, you know, there was a group of people who had a study group in town who was studying the Constitution. I joined them.
So, Gil, you come back from your service in Germany. You come back to Montana. Is that right?
Right. I grew up here in Polson. Well, on a farm.
Mm-hmm. So, what was it like coming back here?
Well, I started in farming, helping my dad, but the sentiment in the nation at that time was a nation that was torn. The anti-Vietnam War protesters. I'm not for war, but I know there's something worse than war, and that's slavery, because I firsthand witnessed that in Berlin again. But I learned of a study group studying the Constitution of the United States of America, and I wanted to be better informed and maybe counteract some of that negativity that was being expressed. But it seemed like all these study groups, we were just speaking to the same people all the time. We weren't really branching out and speaking to educate society. So we started bringing in some speakers, different forums, and so forth, different communities around. I helped with that, but bringing in those speakers was very expensive, and so I was using my money to help bring in those things, and pretty soon I realized this is costing me quite a bit. I don't have the budget, so I was really agonizing over this one night, and at 3 o'clock in the morning. I remember I was still collecting antiques. I had amassed quite a collection, and a lot of Americana, and this inspiration came to me to use my antiques to teach the message, basically of free enterprise, because that's what the Constitution guaranteed. And so at that inspiration, it was almost like, you're speaking to me, use your antiques to teach. And that's when the idea came from the Walking Plow, which had been used for centuries, we made that tremendous leap from there after the Constitution was established, from the Walking Plow to walking on the moon. And that was basically a pretty easy message, because I had antique walking plows. I decided to start the museum to help teach that message, because here's all these antiques. Use my antiques to teach. That message kept ringing in my ears. And so when some people found out we were starting the museum, we found this property. It was very reasonable. And so I received a donation of astronaut stuff, man walking on the moon, some original newspapers and so forth. They framed those and put them up. So we had the Walking Plow, the Walking on the Moon in our first display. So when people ask about, well, how did this museum start? Instead of telling them the whole story, sitting down with them, because all of them don't have time to sit down, nor do I. So I wrote a booklet about it. And it's called The Story of the Miracle of America Museum. And I explain all those things in there. And then we display some of the different displays that do it. And so if anyone, I encourage them to, it's very reasonable for 50 pages, $7.50 at the gift shop. Or if they want to get one through the mail, we mail them out in these envelopes. I've already got a self-addressed stamped envelope. And they can learn about the museum. Or they may want to become involved, and this tells them how they could help us financially set up the endowment fund, so the interest off of that would pay for staff after I don't show up for breakfast. So that's kind of basically the story, but it's ongoing. The book is not going to cover the future. We keep growing, we keep improving. Occasionally I get inspiration, and not everything talks about America. Some people don't care about America, and they need to be taught. They need to visualize what's happened with the Constitution, how that helped us establish the free enterprise concept. And so some of the antiques are just antiques, and people come from all over the world actually to see some of them, like some of our big collections, like our antique motorcycles from 1912. Up to around 66. Fabulous collection, if I do say so myself. I mean, when people come all over the world, one man claimed he rode all the way up from Florida on his motorcycle to Montana to see our motorcycle collection, because he'd seen it on our website.
And that's a rich part of America, just transportation. Talk about transportation as a method of not just moving around, but ideas and freedom, responsibility.
Well, you know, when I was in Berlin, East Berlin, people couldn't travel. They couldn't travel to the Western sector or anywhere else. It was highly regulated. So that's one of the freedoms we enjoy in America. There was actually one movie, at least one, talking of that, the Great Escape, where these people, two families wanted to escape Soviet Russia, and they built a hot air balloon. Well, they didn't, it was a pretty intense feeling during that movie and reading the book out of the Reader's Digest, and they didn't know when they came down. You know, they came down in kind of a foresty area. They didn't know if which side of the wall they were on. So they snuck in this farmer's barn and they saw his name on the wagon. Well, private ownership, you see. So they knew they were in a free country. If they'd have been behind the Iron Curtain, it'd been a government wagon. and there was another man that built a hang glider, a motorized hang glider to escape, and he didn't know, you know, flying over the hills, you don't see a iron curtain or a wall there, but when he saw, I think it was like a Coca-Cola sign, similar to the one we have here in our fountain, and he realized, hey, there's advertising here. So free advertising comes along with the freedom to live in America. Of course, with all of these, responsibility. You know, if you're going to advertise a product, you want to have a reputable product and put out something that you're proud of and the people will find useful.
American ingenuity. You touch on a few famous figures throughout American history: Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, Thomas Edison. For those folks who are not sure about the the rich tradition of conservative America. Using those exhibits, how does the museum talk to them in a way that's truthful and in a way that is enlightening?
Well, I think they use the term capitalism as something as evil. We talk about these inventors like Thomas Edison. Yes, he was a capitalist, but he hired people. He actually had a lab where he set people in there. He said, "I'm going to pay you to think up inventions." He had basically an invention factory or invention lab, and he was free to do that, free to buy, to think up ideas, to sell, freedom to, even the freedom to fail. If they screw up, the government shouldn't be bailing them out because that costs the taxpayer money, and so they should say, "Well, gee, I didn't do so good that time. I'll have to think of a fix for that or a better product." And so, capitalism hires people. Well, these people, the capitalists, have a terrific investment, and so they're hiring people. But the wages. So some people say, "Well, they need to get more wages." Well, the workman's comp, insurance, and all those government regulations cost money. So sure, maybe this guy is making millions of dollars, but he's also invested in his factories and businesses to hire these people. So capitalism is not necessarily evil.
Would you say that government reliance stifles invention and entrepreneurship?
Oh, definitely. The government controls all the permits and people looking over your shoulder, making sure you do it this way and that way. People that are smart enough to invent something, they know about those things. They don't need some big government standing over their shoulder or overtaxing them. It stifles incentive. That's not the American way. That's like socialism or communism when you have too many controls. So let the people decide who they want to buy their product from, how much they want to pay. If they're overcharging, well, they'll go to the person that doesn't charge so much. Or if they build a piece of junk, that'll soon get out, and the people say, "Oh, he's building junk. I'm going to go to this guy that's building better quality stuff." So the things we have in the museum, we have some things that were kind of poor inventions. But then we have some things that were wonderful things. Can openers, mouse traps, egg beaters, something as simple as that. And we have a lot of those things in the museum, and people relate to those.
In the museum, there is one exhibit that speaks of the need for balance in terms of society and government. You mentioned communism, socialism, capitalism. Talk about the other side of that scale, if you will, that teeters to tyranny and in oppression, as well as when there is no regulation, when it's completely all for one or everyone for himself, and we call that anarchy.
Yeah.
What does the museum have? What are you saying in the museum here? What sort of exhibit do you have that you can speak to?
Well, we have that covered in our book. We call it the balance beam of balance of government, if you will, in the Constitution section. And on one hand, anarchy on the right hand, and the left hand, you have tyranny. And here we have a graph in this book here in the Constitution section, and we use the scales to symbolize balance. There's also a big chain coming across the front of that display. It does two purposes. It keeps people out of it from messing with stuff. But it's symbolic of Thomas Jefferson's quote about binding them down from mischief. I mean, he means bind the men of government down from mischief by the change of the Constitution. Let the people work. Now, anarchy is not a good lifestyle either. That's secular humanism. If it feels good, do it. I can punch you in the nose, and your rights. You say my rights stop at the end of your nose. I don't have a right to punch you in the nose. But an anarchist doesn't care. He'll just do what he wants. burn, riot, whatever. So the government sees the people living that kind of lifestyle, and they say, oh, we've got to pass more laws to keep them from doing that. So the government becomes, at that point, more powerful. So if we want to bring the government back to the balanced center, which the Founding Fathers wanted, we need to act more responsibly. Say, government, we don't need you telling that, because we can police ourselves or act more responsibly ourselves. Just get off our tail. Come over here and join us in the middle. Let's have this balanced form of government.
The first three words of the preamble are extremely important, and you know what they are. We the people.
Yeah.
Why is that important? Why are those three words important as the springboard to our Constitution?
Well, it's kind of self-explanatory. We the people working together, and we the people, if we're compassionate, we see somebody that's poor, we're going to help them on our own. If the government comes in and helps them, they got to get that money from somewhere. That comes out of taxes. And one of our was it David Crockett, I think, that was a congressman, and he wanted to take tax money to help this. I think it was a widow, and he was severely scolded by a man that said, you know, if you want to help her out of your own pocket, that's fine. It's a wonderful thing to help her. But don't take the public money, because they might have somebody else they want to help, and they need to use their money responsibly. And so then you've got the administrative costs that when you have too much government too. So that's what we're seeing today.
400 years ago or so, people came over by boat, fleeing oppression from religious overbearance.
Yeah.
You have a display that speaks of that. Where do you see America going now in light of what's happening in the last few years, few months or so, with religious tolerance, religious freedom?
Well, the Founding Fathers believed in God. Now they didn't practice sectarianism, like well, we have to be Presbyterian or Baptist or Catholic or whatever. It was a universal religion of a belief in a divine being. And, you know, the Lord will bless us. In 2 Chronicles 7:14 in the King James Version Bible, the Lord gives us a promise that He will heal our land. But that's dependent. It says, if my people will humble themselves and pray and turn from their wicked ways, then I will heal their land. So we have to look to God. Now, for example, California says, as some of the people said, God, get out of our state. Well, look what's happening to California right this very day. September, 16th today? 2020, it's burning up. They're being cleansed by fire, if you will. They kick God out. What do we expect? Do we expect Him to bless Him when we kick Him out? No, we can't expect that. So.
And I know you're not, because you and I, we've toured the museum extensively the last few days. You're not overbearing with the religious themes, like you said. It's you don't push sectarianism,
right?
But there is a Creator God.
Yeah.
That man is created in His image. We call that Imago Dei. That there are 4 chapters of, if you will, of humankind. There's the creation, chapter 1. There's the fall of man, chapter 2. Chapter 3 is the resurrection, and in chapter 4 is the restoration of the kingdom. You don't heavily push that. But you do promote America and America goodness, which is based on this whole truth of the spiritual aspect of humankind. Do you do you find that some visitors are offended by that? And if so, what is the message that you want people to know, rather than just preaching to the choir, people who are very like-minded, but people who are of different minds, which is a wonderful thing?
Well, that's a pretty tough question, because so many people that have different opinions. That's why we go with a universal religion of a supreme being. Our nation was founded on a Judeo-Christian belief. The founding fathers believed in God. They were struggling in the Constitutional Convention, which the anniversary is tomorrow, in fact. And they were struggling, and finally Ben Franklin said, "Is it possible that a sparrow can fall to the ground without the Lord, with the Lord knowing it and not aware of what's happening here? We need to pray for guidance here." And from that point on, they began making a little more progress. Anyhow, there's people that come in the museum that don't agree with us.
Some are
But
not
they-
even.
They're not Christian. They're not Americans. We've even had some professing communists come through the museum. They say, "Boy, we love your museum. We may not agree with your philosophy or everything that you're saying, but we love your museum."
And they're most welcome. aren't
Yes,
they?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. I try and understand. I don't argue with them. One man came in and said, "Well, I like your museum, but you're very opinionated." I said, "Well, show me where you think I'm opinionated, and let's discuss it." So we try and understand one another. Obviously, we're trying to teach Americanism.
Let's turn a corner here and talk about what you have a passion for here in terms of your collection. You have shown me an extensive collection of military vehicles, jeeps, transport vehicles. You've got a couple of jets out here. You have an extensive collection of motorcycles, cars, classic cars, vintage cars. What really is your passion here? If you had one, does it change from year to year in terms of what you have for collections?
I'm glad you asked me about change, because there's many times in my life where I really was seriously collecting, like the motorcycles. I've been collecting them for 50 years, restoring them, rebuilding them. But there comes a time when that doesn't bring happiness. There's a lot of collectors out there. They want to collect something. They just go whole hog, and you can't outbid them on eBay. But items don't bring happiness. What brings me more happiness in the museum is when I see a family, say a 4-generation family, occasionally a 5-generation family. The youngest is a babe in arms, but when I see them interacting with one another, the antiques prompt the older people they bring up memories, and they can share with those. The other day I saw a man with 2 children. They were on our teeter-totter over by this one-room schoolhouse, and he was playing with them on the teeter-totter. I wish I'd had a camera with me at that point. Or I'll see them in front of the music machine and grandma and showing how the movements of the music machine and so forth. So the real joy, I've come to realize, I could collect every motorcycle on earth or every gun on earth or whatever. That doesn't do it. It's the mission of the museum is to reinstill a belief in America, and maybe if I can help do that through generational bonding, then these people become the young people who say, "Wow, this is pretty neat stuff," and grandma will tell them about their experiences with it and so forth. So that's been a real blessing to me to see that happen.
So it really tickles you pink, and you mentioned it, that you wish you had a camera to film that dad with two young kids on that teeter-totter, because their happiness extended to you, and it's not so much the items, the collection that you have, the pieces that you have here, but it's the happiness that people get.
Yeah.
You get that happiness, and you're seeing that as you get a little bit older. Yes.
Right. Yeah. I think I've overcome the possession of rare artifacts. I mean, I love them. I like especially the art form, functional art, I call it, that the pioneers, the old timers, put into a product. And that art form attracts me. It's pleasing to see a serpentine shaped wrench or a spoke on a flywheel or something like that. But yes, I think the happiness that it brings people, and I think that's part of the miracle. I've seen families that have come in here and this bond, that they didn't know anything about grandma or grandpa before, or maybe their parents. And so the artifacts in the museum is probably more predominant in the military section for families that have had veterans, because wartime you see a lot of atrocities, and now that doesn't mean that the veteran is going to be remembering the blood and guts, but he might remember Army life. And maybe some experiences that he had and share, and so the family learns more from there. We've had some donations come in, and people say, Dad never talked about the war, but I had one woman. I have my machine and Wally's shop about 150 yards away, and one woman asked, "Where's the fountain? Who put this together?" She went through the military section. She came over there with tears in my eyes, wanted to give me a hug. I mean, because I helped her understand her father. Not I, but the displaced. I helped her understand her father. He would never talk about the military. And then one time, I overheard, I was right into the second room in the military room, I overheard a man from Germany. His daughter had moved here to Polson. But the man from Germany was apologizing to his daughter, explaining that he was in the German army, but he had to be, or otherwise he'd either be shot or sent to the slave camp. And so those are some really interesting things. I could write books and books about some of the experiences. I mean, probably I should do that, but I've got so much other work to do.
So Gil, I really appreciate the contribution that not only this museum provides for not just Montana, but the whole U.S. and the globe too, because like you said, a lot of people out front there's a little chalkboard that lists all these different countries people are coming from to visit your museum, but also what you bring to this, what you bring to the narrative of the miracle of America. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to the Miracle of America Museum.